Q6329-1, which is applicable to a private pilot with ASEL ratings who has never flown a tailwheel airplane. The pilot: A. May fly solo with no instruction required. B. Must have received instruction and have a logbook endorsement before acting as pilot in command. C. Must have received at least 1 hour of instruction and have a logbook endorsement before carrying passengers. The correct answer is B. A private pilot with airplane single-engine land (ASEL) ratings who has never flown a tailwheel airplane must receive instruction and obtain a logbook endorsement before acting as pilot in command of a tailwheel airplane. Operating a tailwheel airplane requires specific knowledge and skills due to its unique handling characteristics during takeoff, landing, and ground handling. Therefore, it is necessary for the pilot to receive proper instruction from a qualified flight instructor who is experienced in tailwheel operations. The instruction will cover topics such as tailwheel aerodynamics, ground handling techniques, crosswind operations, and the differences in landing and takeoff procedures compared to tricycle gear airplanes. The flight instructor will provide guidance, demonstrations, and supervised practice to ensure that the pilot becomes proficient in operating a tailwheel airplane. After completing the required instruction and demonstrating proficiency, the pilot must obtain a logbook endorsement from the flight instructor. This endorsement certifies that the pilot has received the necessary training and is authorized to act as pilot in command of a tailwheel airplane. This requirement ensures that pilots have the necessary knowledge and skills to safely operate tailwheel airplanes and understand the differences between tailwheel and tricycle gear aircraft. It promotes safety and helps prevent accidents resulting from inadequate training or unfamiliarity with tailwheel operations. 6330. What minimum documentation is required to take an FAA knowledge test for any flight instructor rating? A. Proper identification. B. Proof of satisfactory completion of the appropriate ground training or home study course. C. Authorization from an FAA who has verified and endorsed the applicant's training record. The correct answer is A. The minimum documentation required to take an FAA knowledge test for any flight instructor rating is proper identification. When appearing for an FAA knowledge test, the applicant must provide valid identification to verify their identity. Acceptable forms of identification typically include a government-issued photo ID, such as a passport or driver's license. It is important to ensure that the identification document is current and not expired. The name on the identification must match the name provided during the registration process for the knowledge test. The purpose of this requirement is to establish the identity of the individual taking the test and prevent any fraudulent activity. By verifying the identity of the test taker, the FAA ensures the integrity of the testing process and maintains the credibility of the issued certificates and ratings. While proof of completion of ground training or home study courses may be necessary for other aspects of pilot certification, such as practical tests or application processes, it is not specifically required for taking an FAA knowledge test for a flight instructor rating. 6334. A written statement from an authorized instructor certifying that an applicant has received the required training and preparation for a practical test must be dated within how many days preceding the date of application? A. 60. B. 90. C. 120. The correct answer is A. A written statement from an authorized instructor certifying that an applicant has received the required training and preparation for a practical test must be dated within 60 days preceding the date of application. When applying for a practical test, such as a check ride for a pilot certificate or rating, the applicant is required to provide evidence of having received the necessary training from an authorized instructor. This training ensures that the applicant is adequately prepared to demonstrate the required knowledge and skills during the practical test. To verify the recentness and relevance of the training, the written statement from the instructor must be dated within 60 days of the application date. This requirement ensures that the training is current and reflects the applicant's proficiency at the time of the test. It is important for applicants to plan accordingly and ensure that the written statement from the instructor is obtained and dated within the specified time frame to meet the regulatory requirements for the practical test application. 6335. To be eligible for a practical test under 14 CFR Part 61, an applicant must have passed the appropriate knowledge test, when required, within the preceding A. 6 calendar months, B. 12 calendar months, C. 24 calendar months. The correct answer is C. To be eligible for a practical test, an applicant must meet certain requirements, which may include passing a knowledge test, completing the required training, and meeting specific experience criteria. Regarding the knowledge test requirement, here are some additional details. Knowledge test requirement. The applicant must have passed the appropriate knowledge test for the certificate or rating they are seeking. The specific knowledge test required depends on the type of certificate or rating being pursued, e.g., private pilot, instrument rating, commercial pilot, etc. Time frame. The knowledge test must have been passed within the preceding 24 calendar months before the date of the practical test. This means that the applicant's knowledge test results must be valid and current within this time frame to be eligible for the practical test. Currency of knowledge. The requirement ensures that the applicant's knowledge is up to date and reflects current regulations, procedures, and aeronautical information. It also helps ensure that the applicant has retained the necessary knowledge since passing the knowledge test. Revalidation. If the knowledge test results have expired, i.e., beyond the 24-month time frame, the applicant must retake and pass the appropriate knowledge test before being eligible for the practical test. It's important for applicants to keep track of the expiration date of their knowledge test results and plan accordingly to ensure they meet the eligibility requirements when scheduling their practical test. 6337. If all increments for a practical test for a certificate or rating are not completed on one date, all remaining increments must be satisfactorily completed no later than A. 90 days from the date of the test, B. 120 days from the date of the test, C. 60 days from the date of the test. The correct answer is C. When a candidate takes a practical test for a certificate or rating, there are specific tasks and requirements that need to be completed to demonstrate competency. These tasks are divided into increments, and it is expected that all increments will be satisfactorily completed on the same day. However, there may be situations where a candidate is unable to complete all the required increments on the initial test day. In such cases, the remaining increments must be completed within a specified time frame. According to the regulations, all remaining increments must be satisfactorily completed no later than 60 days from the date of the test. This means that if a candidate successfully completes some portions of the practical test, but is unable to finish all the required tasks, they have a maximum of 60 days to schedule and complete the remaining increments. If the candidate fails to complete the remaining increments within the 60-day period, they will be required to retake the entire practical test. It's important for candidates to plan their test schedule and ensure they have enough time to complete all the required elements within the designated time frame to avoid any unnecessary complications or delays in the certification process. It's worth noting that the 60-day time limit applies specifically to practical tests for certificates or ratings conducted under 14 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 61, which pertains to pilot certification. Different time limits may apply to other types of tests or certifications in aviation, so it's essential to consult the appropriate regulations and requirements for each specific situation.